creating those safe spaces, and again, that sounds like such a fluffy word, but creating spaces where guys can actually unpack shit.
We're creating brave spaces, right? To be brave, there has to be a sense of safety, but bravery also requires some courageousness to lean in, to allow us to start to be open to learning, right? Like if we're just going to stay safe, well, are we really moving? Are we actually challenging ourselves?
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about with our groups is I always tell them, safe, not comfortable.
Yeah.
Because we don't grow if we're comfortable.
No.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about why dudes are pissed off and what to do about it.
Well, here we are today. Young men are angry. This just in, hot off the presses. How do we feel about that? Hey?
The question is, are they angrier today than they were when I was a young man?
Canadian Men's Health did a research project that launched in November, outlining that men 19 to 29 are 50% at risk of problem anger, and that 39% of them, like from the time that the recording was taken, 39% of them wanted to hit somebody.
I hate to say it, but if I go back to when I was 19, we did punch people. I mean, there's a million guys my age with stories of shit going sideways in a bar, dealing with things with violence. Now, it was somewhat restrained to it. I think it was still it feels like in the past, like when my generation, there was a respect in the Donnybrook, right? Like we could trade fists and things could go so far, and there was still some respect between the combatants. For me, it's the difference between anger and temper. And like my anger is somewhat justified and is always valid. Like it's showing me something I don't like or that I'm not comfortable with externally, which is one thing. The trickier part is when it's showing me something about myself. That's the harder part to see. But my temper is how I introduce that anger to the world. And that's where it comes into, like, it's not good for me to punch people. It's not good for them. It doesn't make anything better. It feels good in the moment. Let's be honest. It's great to have that release, but the negative consequences almost immediately start following. Right. And so my temper is something I really have to keep an eye on. And if I don't manage the emotions around my anger well, then my temper can get the best of me. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think part of the difference is, to your point, when we were younger, we'd get in a fight, somebody might get a black eye. Today, somebody gets in a fight, they get shot, they get stabbed, they're dead. And that's a different piece of the equation. And I think it's important to also acknowledge that anger isn't a bad thing. So I like that the report talked about problem anger. So anger itself isn't a bad thing. It's a signal, something going on that is setting you off, that you're not comfortable with, whether that's internal or external. The problem becomes when we don't know how to effectively manage that anger. We don't know how to deal with that in a healthy way. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, we're not suggesting we need to rid ourselves of anger necessarily. And I think that for a lot of guys, certainly guys that I see, I mean, again, we understand that anger is the acceptable emotion, but I think a lot of times we just try and pretend it's not there if we want to avoid acting out on it. So rather than finding a healthy way to express the anger, we pretend it's not there, and then at some point it bubbles up and bubbles over, and it does cause those behaviors that are problematic.
Well, it's interesting listening to both of you and the way that you view anger as it is a healthy emotion. Like Mike said, anger triggers something. Anger usually stands in front of a whole lot of other things as like a protective mechanism. I've found that with myself and other men that I've chatted with and worked with as well, is like anger typically shows up as a protector, right? It stands in front of some expectation or some check and balances that we have that have gone, hey, this doesn't add up anymore. Now we need to go deal with something. And it's within that dealing that really can either be very positive or very negative to the outcomes that come after it, right? Like it's, I think of it always as like all the emotions are welcome and available. It's like, what do you do in between the reaction to something and the response to something? And that, you know, where we look at problem anger or just anger as a whole as being bad, well, then that really makes it hard to take that pause and go, well, what do I do with this? If I'm a bad person for having this experience, total normal human experience, if we can take that off the shelf and be like, you're having a very total normal human experience. Now it's your choice to do with something with it next. What are you going to choose?
I would say the literacy around emotions, like this is something that came up when I read through some of the comments on the piece there around the research. And it's true to my own experience is that I sort of was brought up by a generation before me that had a certain sensibility around these things. The world that I live in now is not the same as the guy that taught me, right? Or the parents, the world that taught me these things is not the world that I live in now. And so I came up knowing and understanding probably like, let's say 5, I'm going to be generous, say five emotions, right? And in the absence of the knowledge of the other 75 or a million of them, right? Like I can only understand, process what I'm going through the lens of those 5 emotions. So it's quite often going to be anger. If it's anything on the negative, I'm just angry or I'm sad. I'm angry or I'm sad. But if there's this whole other spectrum of things that I can say, am I really angry right now? Or am I feeling unsafe? Am I feeling vulnerable? And I don't like being uncomfortable. You know, being able to understand sort of a greater spectrum of my emotional experience and being able to identify like, you know, like immediately and quickly move into different emotions when anger is really just the default one. I mean, that's just the one I go to because in the absence of other options. You know, sometimes, you know, the more I've learned and the more and this is a lot of counseling and being open to it and wanting a new experience in the world because I don't want to be angry. Like just doing the work and learning the stuff. Well, now, you know, I don't get angry as often because I got time to spend like just feeling hurt that I was left out or ignored or vulnerable because one of my other insecurities got played on, right? Like, and being able to operate and then now temper and anger aren't even something I need to deal with. Punching people isn't the answer, you know. It's interesting. So like I think, you know, one of the challenges is with every generation is we are brought up by people that aren't living in the same world that we continue to live in. And the world is asking a lot of men these days. In very quick order, we're being asked to rise to a higher level, to conduct ourselves in a better way. It's all great things, but it's coming fast and furious because of social media. We're comparing ourselves to others. And so I think anger is the default mode when we're frustrated because too much is being, an overwhelming amount of change is being asked of us. I think it's totally understandable that young people, young men especially, feel very angry and frustrated and scared and like they don't belong anywhere anymore, right?
And, you know, I love what you said, Trevor, but I've started thinking in terms of, you know, what you described, like that's black belt level shit. So how do we get to, you know, what's the white belt version of that? And for me, that piece is just recognizing that anger as that trigger to, okay, slow down, take a breath, and using that as the cue. So rather, you know, again, just having usually when I get angry, I punch things. Instead, when I get angry, I'm going to take a breath. And right, like it's that usually instead I'm going to. I find that really useful for so many things. Behaviors I want to change or outcomes I want to change is how do I take that thing and use that as the trigger to anchor in the new habit or activity or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
And you're right, like asking that question. Somebody gave me the phrase that I loved: anger is often sadness masked.
Oof.
Because yeah, anger, we're dudes, we're allowed to be angry. It's celebrated, but Jesus, man, we're not allowed to be sad. We're not allowed to be sad at
Oh,
all. So to your point about the nuance in language, that would be a great starting point, is using that as a trigger to take that pause, take that breath. And my challenge for any guy out there: when you get pissed, find 2 or 3 other words other than pissed or angry to
yeah.
describe what you're feeling,
Yes.
right? Is
Yep.
it because the difference between I'm a little bit irritated and enraged is a
Yeah.
substantially different response, Gene, to your point, in behavior. But if we don't have that nuance, irritated and enraged end up having the same response.
The thing I also heard from you, Mike, is we're stripping away the identity of an emotion, right? From I am
We're in,
angry to I'm an angry man to I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling disappointed. Those,
Right.
just even making those little shifts start to add some nuance and a bit of a gap between it, right? And so instead of you being, oh, I'm an angry man, am I a bad man? Am I a happy man? No, I'm a man experiencing happiness. I'm a man experiencing anger.
Oh.
I'm a man feeling these things. I also find that switching that word to feelings also, like that, the white to blue belt situation is what now all of a sudden be like,
Yeah.
great. Well, now where are you feeling that within your body, right? And actually getting kind of like in touch with, where do you feel anger? Well, I'm just angry. Be like, no. If you're feeling it, where are you feeling it? Is your face getting flushed? Is your chest getting tight? Is like getting really specific and non-judgmental on top of it, of just tracking the experience your body's having through that emotion. And guess what?
yeah.
It works for all the
Key.
other emotions as well, right? It starts to be a
Totally.
cue.
The key to what you're saying is, look, you're shifting the process from an emotional experience to an analytical, like data driven. Like, what am I feeling?
Yes.
Where am I feeling it? What does it feel like? All right, now I've studied this, I looked at it, I understand it way more. I can choose, is there something real that I need to explore here? Or can I just set it aside and go back to being happy? And with any emotion, right? And so I love what you're saying about the feeling, because feelings are temporary, right? And so when I am an angry guy, that's a big commitment. Like, I'm committing to something much longer term than a feeling. I'm feeling angry. Well, now I can talk about it. I can look at it. I can set it aside if I want. I'm not embodying that anger, right?
Yeah. When I
love
love that thought, because I quite dislike the phrase anger management.
that.
What I'd like to flip that to is anger investigator,
Mhm.
which comes back much more to what you guys are talking about. Because when we do that, when we start to investigate, where do I feel it in my body? Where is this really coming from? What is the feeling? How do I label that feeling? Again, there's all kinds of different levels of depth of that investigation. But, I think often we try and jump right to the management side of the equation. And it's like any business leader will tell you, it's not about just solving the problem. It's actually, the hardest part is identifying the actual problem. And so often we try and solve a problem that really isn't the problem. And, back to what we talked about earlier, if anger is actually sadness masked and we're trying to solve anger, that's not going to fix anything.
Oh,
And so if we're looking at problems and we're recognizing that guys, especially younger guys, are more angry and feeling, I think there's to a higher intensity if the reaction is to punch, the want, the need is to punch people, then what are some of those challenges? How can we acknowledge the experience, what they are experiencing these days? What do we see as men in the world that is igniting or building up this pressure?
I think, based on, so we were looking at some of those Reddit posts that were related to
Yep.
the press release, like what's one of the underlying things that kind of come up through it is like, it's almost like they're talking about the goalposts keep moving on them faster than they can adjust to it, right? I've felt that. I'm sure you guys have felt that over time as well. Things are happening at an exponential rate across so many sectors of our lives. You know, like to Trevor, you were talking about how like that level for what it means to be a man has definitely gone up, and it's become more nuanced about what that is. Well, that takes some time. That takes us reinventing the playbook, because like you shared earlier, we didn't inherit that playbook that works for today's standards. So we're helping build and curate that. And then as well, be like, there's no doubt about it, like the economics of the world have changed, and where the valuableness of young men or young people, period, come into question about where do they get their footing? Where do they get their community, right? Like in that post, we saw jobs were a big thing. Community was a big thing. You know, like I'll wrap it in like brotherhood or mentorhood, obviously, is like missing from the lack of the community and having those right places. And so like, where are they drifting off to? Well, where they're being,
And you might be comparing where you're at to where your parents were at that same age, right? And the life that they provided for you. And you're maybe unable to start a family yourself. You're unable to take that step, and maybe you grew up wanting that, right? And you know, I'm 50 years old. Me and my partner just bought our very first house like this year. I can see, and I guess that frustration was building inside of me. So I can't even imagine what it's like at 20 years old to be looking ahead and like, you know, it's a daunting task. This world, right? And we also have these other social pressures. Is we're having a lot of challenging conversations around privilege, around the male experience, and what I've gleaned, and I saw it in the Reddit comments, but I also hear it in some of the young guys I'm talking to, is they're being asked to give up their privilege before they've benefited from it, like past generations, and that feels unfair. But I think it's this misnomer that like in order to fight for other people to have the privileges I have to give something up. And what I see, and what other guys I think that have found a place of calm and steadiness have found, is like, you know, my privilege is not a threat. I'm just being asked to honor my privilege and to accept it, and to be like, you know, appreciate it, and then look for opportunities to share that with other people. I'm not being asked to give it up in any way, right? Just being able to level the playing field. But I think for a young generation that's seen the benefits of that privilege in their father's lives and in other men around them, and now it looks like, again, the goalpost is shifting, and we're being asked, young men, like, if I came into today's world at 19 years old, I would, with my logic I was raised in, I would feel so out of touch, so scared to just like, is this the right answer? Do I say this thing? Is this okay? What are the boundaries? And some of them are obvious. Like there's some really obvious boundaries that should have been there for every generation. But there's some now that like there's language that's changing quickly. And we need to acknowledge that it's making it different to be in the power position.
I think you nailed it when you talk. We need to acknowledge the experience of that angry young man, because it's valid, it's real. We may not like it, we may want something different, but it's valid, it's real. So let's not pretend that you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, right.
Because you do. And I find a lot of guys that I talk to often feel like, yeah, but I'm not allowed to feel like that because I'm privileged, or because this, or because that. So I'm not allowed to feel this way. And both things can be true. I can hold privilege, and I can feel like I'll never get ahead. And I can feel like I'm pissed at the world because I don't know, am I supposed to hold the door open for you, or am I not? I don't know.
Yeah. For sure.
So both things can be true. And I think we can't discount the experience. And for me, what I hope to bring to this world is to create more spaces for guys to unpack that in an environment where it's not going to be a finger wag that says you shouldn't feel that. And it's really
people are going to feel safe talking about this challenging stuff, right? It doesn't turn off like a switch.
No.
If we can't talk about it and get to a place of mutual understanding, it's just going to be us against them or them against us or whatever that looks like. There's division in that. The community comes from the shared conversation and acknowledging that this is a rapidly changing environment, and people are going to get it quicker than they're not. They're going to, there's going to be people that pick this up and they're like, yeah, no big deal. There's going to be people who their entire identities are wrapped up in who they are right now in this moment and changing. Like, to give that up, that one thing you have certainty around is who I am and what I believe. That's hard. That's really, really hard work to do.
And the interesting thing is, as soon as you said, oh, the certainty of who I am, it's like, looking back on it, it's like, that's the least certain thing that I can look back on it and say with confidence, is like knowing who I was back, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, hell, even a year ago. Like, that guy has seen so much evolution, and knowing, but that comes with like hindsight, and that comes with experience, being 19, going, this is who I think I want to be it a job, be it a role, be it however you're trying to define yourself. Like, that feels so close. And so, like, I'll use the word intimate to yourself, to saying, hey, this is who I am and how I'm now going to express myself. And without the guidebook, or without the experience or the practice of standing into that as well, is like, well, that I am statement does take them places. Doesn't mean it's always the right places, but it gets you moving. And if, there's some value in having, older, more experienced mentors like us, being able to say, hey, like, what if you change some of those words around? What if you held that identity less, more loose, and allowed it to grow, and allow the uncertainty to be in that, and still figure out, how do I bring value, knowing that who I am and my experiences are going to continue to evolve how I develop and deploy my value in this world.
Like, we crave certainty. And so in the absence, if I don't understand my situation, a circumstance, something that's going on in the world, I'm naturally inclined to grab onto something that gives me some certainty around my knowledge, my place in it. Am I going to be okay? Am I safe here? And sometimes we cling on to really precarious handholds, or really limited like ideas or opinions that are just not well formed out. And then we're like, okay, I've got this now. I'm okay. I can move on to other things. But that thing you grabbed onto, it's got a bunch of razor blades on it, and it's edgy. It's not going to be good for you,
Well, it's like back to that survival mechanism, is like, well, we're going to move towards a known evil versus a potentially good outcome, because we know how to handle and experience and work within all of that as well, right? Like, that's just how our spicy little meatballs up between our ears.
Yep.
They were built to keep us alive hundreds of thousands of years ago, and that programming is still running every single day that we hit something. So, like, to your point of like that certainty and the off ramp and all of these handholds, is like, I'm reminded of a metaphor a friend has shared. It's like, well, you can't read the label of the pickle jar from inside the pickle jar, right? So just being a person on the other side to read that label back and ask those questions from a place of curiosity, and just doing a simple set of reflections with friends. Like, this is things that you can practice. Like, everyone probably has one person they can say, hey, I want to practice this. Are you down for helping each other practice and really get more in touch with each other and find out how we're going to do this? If I were to give one tip, is like, ask questions that don't start with why. Why is a super defensive word. It's like, why inherently goes, there's something wrong here, right? Versus, well, what, where, how, like.
But it's interesting, because I think a lot of people grow up, I grew up with a father that didn't ask questions. Like, to be clear, in my mind, I don't glorify my dad asking questions. I glorify the moments he walked in the room and had the answer. Like, when I cling to my father and my image of him, and like, and me in the world is always trying to resemble, my dad was my hero, right? Like, for a large part of my life, it was me trying to embody that version of a man. And asking questions is not what I remember. I'm sure there was lots of them, but he was always this steadfast guy that had the answer. He knew what the next right thing to do was, and My mom would remind me, like, he made lots of mistakes. He wasn't always right. I'd be like, yeah, so it's weird how we have this romantic idea.
Yeah, like if I think back to what's some of those themes that were from those articles and from what's been brought up here today is this like there's the big theme of like acknowledging that experience, that feeling you're having is real. Your circumstances that you are feeling have a degree of truth to it, right? Like the other side to that too, I think Mike, you mentioned it about multiple truths is like when we're living in a world where there are multiple truths, right? There's no like one set of truth. And so how are you going to write that against what you value, how you want to show up, and what you're going to bring out into the world, knowing that the world has always been trying to kill us in some shape or form, and that's why we have the mechanisms that we have. So how are we going to show up, right? And one last thing that I keep get reminded of is like a self-check on, be like, hey, okay, we've done some of the things that we talked about. We're feeling it. I'm feeling this thing. Where is it in my body? Well, what's next is like, well, is what's happening true? Is what I'm going to do next kind? And is it going to bring value? Right? Like having those three kind of gut check questions while you're in your practicing your pause onto how you're going to respond and bring that forward. It doesn't take away the fact that whatever you're experiencing, if it sucks, and that's too, and that sucks, right? And we can choose to move forward, and we have the ability to build, and this doesn't have to stay always this way.
Yeah, I think for me, and I think you touched on it earlier, Trevor, is to remember that emotions are temporary, emotions are fleeting, and let's not make a very permanent decision based on a very temporary emotion. Because punching somebody when you're angry, that can have some pretty permanent consequences at times. So just practicing that pause, that space between stimulus and response, as Viktor Frankl talks about, I think is such a powerful thing.
That pause is the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
That is the most powerful thing.
I think the building your capacity for that pause becomes a superpower, right? And hearing both of you guys talk about, well, has it gotten easier as we've gotten older? I don't know if that's actually true. Our way of navigating it has become more calmer, right? We've learned how to create more pauses, which then allow us to make more clearer decisions based on who do we want to be and how do we want to show up. Doesn't mean we always get it right. I'll be the first one to raise my hand, say I don't always get it right, but I hope I'm having a better batting average than I did 20 years ago.
No, and I think the white belt version of all of this is, if you want to take away a practice from what we've talked about, is to practice that pause. One of the things that, when Michelle and I first started dating, she struggled a lot with the pause. So I would make us, when we pulled up to a restaurant or going to a friend's house, I would make us sit in the car for 60 seconds before we did anything and just wait. And to be fair, I don't think she could last 60 seconds. So we probably did 5 or 10, like legitimately, she couldn't handle 60 seconds. So if it's got to be 10 seconds, but the next time you drive to an appointment or a restaurant or to meet somebody, literally put 10 seconds on your phone timer and just pause. And if you can do 30 or 60, fantastic. But practice.
Yeah.
And it becomes easier.
Yeah.
It does. And it is a practice, like yoga. It's not something you're ever going to master. It's something you're going to get better and better. It's going to become more of a reflex. I struggle with it. I'm much better than I used to be. Progress over perfection, right? But yeah, like somebody told me once, like, do the second thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Like, so if if you feel yourself have a reaction, that's the pause is to wait for the second reaction, right? I've been in meetings where somebody has said something that ignites me. And now that I'm aware, I know where it starts. It hits me here, it comes up and I get excited and tense, and I'll listen to the traffic outside. I'll just immediately listen for whatever's outside the room. And it's like, it just gets my head out of that first reaction, gives me that pause to where I can like come back in a more productive way that's not going to make myself look bad or create an unsafe space for sharing, because that's usually what happens is you know, I react strongly, and then all of a sudden it's an unsafe space for everyone.
I like that. I think that comes back to me for the thing that comes to mind is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? Because you're right. If somebody did something disrespectful or whatever, I may be super quick-witted and I could fire something back that is going to shut you down in a heartbeat. But is that going to be effective in allowing you to express that anger, explore that anger, whatever that is that's coming up for you? Probably not.
But also, just to be very shallow, it's a boss move to not react to it,
Right.
and just like sit calmly and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
It is such an effective way of shutting down somebody that has ill intent.
What would be your final tip and, the don't change much piece that somebody can take away with them from today's conversation? We'll go to Trevor first.
Why am I angry? Right. Why am I angry? I just get curious. It's hard. It's hard to be angry. I know guys that live in anger so much, and I'm like, dude, your life looks so hard, right? And it's like, ask yourself, why am I angry? Get to know that part, and then hopefully you might be able to make the decision to say, you know what, I have all this other shit to be grateful for. I'm going to focus on that for now, right? I can't buy a house right now. It's hard. I don't have that job I want right now. It's hard, but look at all this other stuff I have right now in this moment that I can be grateful for, and I'll get there. I have great confidence in young people that are going to figure it out. Is it going to be tough? 100%. And I'm sorry it's hard.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think for me, for sure, the pause, just practice the pause. That's the small shift. Back to your boss move thing, one of my favorites is just to kind of, I don't get it. Right? Like that's sometimes all you need to say when somebody's ripping you. I don't get it. And then wait, because it puts it back on them and then they can't explain it. Or if you have to justify your burn or you have to explain your burn, it's not much of a burn. But practice that pause.
I love it, gentlemen. I would say my piece is get connected to where you're feeling it in your body, right? Trevor made the point is like he now knows where he feels it and he can catch it beforehand, right? It's going to sneak up on us. And again, this is a practice and you choose to practice it daily. You can practice this all by yourself as well. Is like you can feel those things and start to feel where the sensations are and change it when you're on your own. Practice it with some friends and say, hey, this is a skill I want to improve upon. Lean into it because you know what? Probably they're feeling the same thing, right? And the fact is that you're actually not alone. Everyone on this show, according to Reddit, are all feeling those things.
Yeah. I was going to say, the research says 65%. So you are not alone, Dan.
All right. Well, thank you guys for another great conversation on the Don't Change Much podcast. And we will talk to everybody on our next episode.